Hello and welcome to today's video. Today I thought we could go over my most versatile palettes in my collection. So if you're excited to hear these top 5 palettes, I actually have 2 honorable mentions too. Then why don't we go ahead and get into it. Alright, as we get started, thank you to Milk for inspiring this video, but yeah, these items are things that in my collection I get like a variety of looks from. They're very versatile, and it's fun because actually as I laid them out and was like looking through all my palettes to do this video, I realized that a lot of these palettes are actually like favorites for me in my collection because I do love like variety. And I would say that a lot of these are definitely like, they have very neutral or like wearable shades in them, but they also have more than one pop of color. Like I don't really think I have a ton of palettes here that have like they're all browns or neutrals and like a pop of blue or a pop of green. A lot of these I can get multiple looks from. But anyways, I need to stop talking and just show you the palettes. So I start out with the 2 honorable mentions. They're not the most versatile thing, or they're things that are so new to me that I can't really attest to really loving them yet, but I do have to give them a shout out. Now this one here, the Nomad by Juvia's Place, is a 9-pan palette, so it's not versatile in the sense of you only get 9 shades, and it is more of like a warm tone kind of thing. But I think for a 9-pan palette, this is incredibly well done. You get some beautiful yellows, you get an orange, you get a neutral shade. The gold is extremely like wearable. It's a beautiful shade. It goes with everything in this palette. You can kind of play up the greens with it. You can play with just the yellows with it. You can play over that orange. It's just a super neutral, beautiful gold. And I think that for it being a 9-pan palette, like again, granted, this one is mostly warm colors, so that's why it's not technically part of the 5 most versatile in my collection. But I think when I look at this palette, I was just kind of, again, taken back by the color story because this one is just a really good 9-pan palette. So I wanted to give this one a little honorable mention. Not the most versatile, but for a 9-pan palette, extremely well done. Okay, so the next honorable mention is one that I have not really used a ton, so I can't really attest to the quality of it yet. This is the Salmone palette from Odin's Eye. I've used it one time and I barely used it. It was like for a really simple eye look that day. But when I look at this like color story, I do think that you can get a little bit more variety than like what I can in some of my other palettes. Like Soft Glam is like one that's very warm tone, very kind of monotone palette. But this one, this pop of purple is a lot of fun. It's got like a mustard shade, a little more orange of a shade. This one leans very mauve. This deepening kind of brown is like the perfect kind of pairing for those kind of shades. And then it's got like a beautiful gold. This shade here is a really pretty like glittery yellow gold kind of topper shade. I don't know if you'll be able to see it that well, but it's really pretty. And then it's got kind of like this green. Hopefully you'll be able to see that, but that compare well with the yellow, again, the orange, and it also is a fun pairing for this purple. I've done a lot of swatch combinations, so while I haven't put this on my eyes yet, I have sat down and like paired out different color pairings that I think I want to do with this palette. And yeah, I'm just pleasantly surprised with the color story so far, although again, can't attest to the quality of it since I haven't really worn it enough yet. Alright, as we get into the actual 5 most versatile palettes in my collection, I do want to say I will have like pros and cons for these palettes. They're not all perfect palettes. The first one I'm going to talk about is this Natasha Denona Lila palette. This is the palette that I'm wearing today on my eyes. And again, this one is one that if you've heard me talk about this palette in the past on my channel, I like it, but I do not love it. And for the amount of money that this palette costs, I would want to love it. And I have to admit that like a lot of these shimmers are gorgeous in the pan. Like it's a gorgeous color story, but they are very like satin metallics versus like sparkly, very high finish, high shine metallics, which is like my biggest drawback for this palette. Today I put this pink all over my lid, and again, I had to like kind of build it up over a glitter glue to get it to kind of shine or like kind of stand out. And again, it's just one that like, it's kind of, you can tell right there, it's very satin versus like a metallic. Like I want it to be metallic and it's just not. But here's the thing. I know that I don't love the formula of these like metallics, but I have to give it to the color story. I do really enjoy the color story of this palette. You get some purple tones, some different kind of purple tones. You get a pink. This gold here is very beautiful and kind of almost duochrome. This here up here is kind of like a orangey red duochrome, and it's very warm in color. But then you have some very cool tone options. You can get like very deep kind of cool tones. This shade here pulls very mauve, and I think that you can get a lot from this palette. You can get gold, you can get red, you can get mauve, you can get cool tone, pinky, purple shades. And I like the variety you can get this palette. I just wish that I loved the metallic formula more. The mattes in here are fantastic, but again, I wish the metallics were a little bit better. But overall, I do really enjoy the color story of this palette. And before I put this away, I also want to swatch for you you Dragon Bite here, which is like literally my favorite shade. It's not going to do it justice on camera, but it's this beautiful kind of red base shade with like a green flip to it. It's so beautiful. So yeah, I just wanted to give this one a quick mention. It is versatile, even though it does have its flaws. Alright, moving into the fourth most versatile palette in my collection, I have my Modern Renaissance palette here. I talk about this palette a lot in like travel videos because I love to travel with this palette. I do like that it is more versatile for a palette. It's one and done kind of thing I can put in my suitcase and like know that I can make looks that I need with it depending on what kind of setting and what I want to wear that day. I have warm tones. It's got these nice like orangey kind of shades. This warm taupe is actually a more neutral color. Antique bronze and Bon Fresco here are very cool tone. The berry in here is very cool tone, or you can work it to be very cool tone with Bon Fresco, and it's just a nice, you can get soft looks, like you have these kind of lighter shades over here, you have the deep shades. It has everything you need in one palette, and I do think that the color story in this is very versatile, and I do love this palette. Now, is it anything groundbreaking or new? No, this palette has been around forever, but it is extremely versatile, and I do really enjoy it for that reason. Alright, moving into my third most versatile palette. This one is newer to me. This is the Sigma Enchanted palette, and it is a gorgeous, gorgeous color story. Now this one does lean a little bit more cool tone when you're like looking directly at it like this. Like you can definitely see like these shades seem a lot more cool tone, but it does have like this kind of warm brown, this gold here. It's not a very like sparkly shade, so it's not something that stands out in the palette. Like for example, like these shades right here are just super glittery, and even Electrum down here is super glittery. And Electrum is one that is kind of got this warm undertone to it. So it's kind of fun to have palettes that have things that you can pull warm tones out of, you can pull cool tones out of. And I really like this color story a lot. So this one, despite being newer to me, I can understand its value in my collection because it is a pretty versatile palette. Alright, moving to palette number 2. This one is my Jackie Aina palette from ABH. I really enjoy this palette. It's beautiful. It's got some more warmer tones, really. These like ginger and like credit and edges, they're all very warm tone. At least on my skin tone, they pull extremely warm. But you have like a fun pop of green that's more, almost slightly more cool tone. Dwala's is a green that shifts, pulls a more warm tone. Lituation is more of a cool tone kind of shade, really beautiful, kind of like a plummy bronze almost, but extremely stunning. And then you have these kind of purples that kind of liven things up. It's a nice pop of color. The red is one of my favorite shades in this palette, but these two like glittery shades down here are just, they ground the palette. They are special shades. They're gorgeous. And I think that every look that I do with this palette, I love. And so I wanted to mention this one because you can get so much from this palette. Alright, time for the last one, my favorite one in my collection. Now, you might know what I'm going to say for this one if you've watched my videos, but my ABH Norvina palette, I stinking love this palette. Not the big one. This is like the first one they ever did with Norvina before like the big gigantic ones came out. But this palette is probably my favorite in my collection still to this day, despite having bought, I have 2 Natasha Denona palettes. I have the gold and the lila palette, and I still think that this one is my favorite palette. Like, it's just stunning. You have like these warm shades here. This is like a more neutral shade. Volatile is a very like cool tone shade. It's very neutral, but yet it has some very fun pops of color with these purples and these pinks. And I just love this palette. I can get warm tones, I can get cool tones, I can get pops of color from it. This is kind of like my perfect color story, honestly. It's just so versatile for me in the way that I like to wear my eyeshadow. Now, I will admit, like, there's not a lot of like depth in these kind of shades. They're all kind of like romantic pops of color, but that's exactly the kind of color stories that I feel more comfortable in. So I just, again, really love and adore this palette, and have to mention this one because it is a super versatile palette in my opinion. And with that being said, that's all 5 palettes plus 2 bonus that I have to show you from my collection. Now, granted, what I have here is a much more condensed version of my collection again. So in the comments, please let me know if you have a versatile palette in your collection that is your favorite. If you have a top 2, top 3, feel free to let me know what your most versatile palettes are, because when I think about the palettes in the future that I want to buy, they either need to fill specific holes in my collection that I feel like I actually want and need and will wear, like almost every shade of green, because I can't seem to get enough green. But I don't need a ton of purples. I have plenty of purples in my collection. I don't really wear blues, so I don't need to get blues in my collection. But I think like I'm very drawn to colors that are like, it's a more neutral palette, but it has some very playful pops of color that you can wear with those kind of neutrals. Those are like my jams. So if you have anything in your collection that you absolutely love, make sure to tell me in the comments, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.